A very warm welcome to everyone. Today is day 7 of our online workshop on qualitative, mixed and participatory research methods. Today's masterclass is by Professor Jayadantas and it's on publication in research. I now invite our HOD of Department of Women's Studies, University of Calicut, Ms. Lena Anand, to welcome the gathering.
Hi, Yamu.
You're audible.
Can you hear?
Yes.
Yes, is it audible?
Yes, there's a slight echo, but you're audible.
There is an echo. Is there echo?
No, it's fine now.
Now it's fine.
Okay. So good afternoon, one and all. So I am just offing my video because I don't have a strong network here. Okay. So yes, a warm good afternoon to all of you, and it is a very great pleasure to be part of such a lengthy, and very scholarship oriented, very systematically arranged an international workshop, and it is the final day, and I am extremely happy to be part of organizing such a program from our department, and many of these scholars from India and from abroad are joining, and they are also getting more insights, deeper insights into various aspects of research. And so yes, and on behalf of Department of Women's Studies, University of Calicut, I take this pleasure to thank our key speaker of today, Professor Dantas, for being part of our program for a long time with us, more than having more than this is the fifth session, and taking so much of time and patience to be part of us, and very keen and passionate in answering all the questions that been raised by our scholars also. So yes, on behalf of Department of Women's Studies, I welcome Professor Jaya Dantas for handling the very important on publication, and for all of the for researchers, the major constraint is regarding the publication, and to have publication in a very reputed journal, and how to get how to do a quality publication and to get it published in an international reputed journal with newer research insights like photo voices and ethnographic research and participatory research methods, which you were discussing all these days. So I hope that the final session is the very meaningful session which has been we're going to handle by our Professor Dantas, and on behalf of Department of Women's Studies and all the participants who have been with us for all these 7 days, I extend a welcome to you, ma'am. And I also extend all the keen researchers who were with us both offline and online, and contacting the entire resource team regarding their queries and about the next sessions and all. And on behalf of Department of Women's Studies, University of Calicut, I extend a hearty welcome to all the research scholars, academicians, and and the students who have been part of this webinar series. And yes, ma'am. Now we can go ahead with our serious discussion. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Can I add something more?
Yes, ma'am. Sure.
Okay. So, as we are discussing research publications, today the topic is that I would like to say something more about our resource person, Professor Dantas. I think it will be interesting for all of you to know more about her own research publications as well. Professor Jaya Dantas has authored 3 books and another 3 edited books. She has 65 journal articles published in high-in-text international journals. She has 17 book chapters 30 research reports and research reports of international projects, and 4 creative works like DVDs, CDs, and all. In addition, there are 20 conference proceedings and 500 media presentations to her credit. Her Google Scholar H index is 26 and her I-10 index is 43, and she has more than 2,500 citations. We all know in the case of science, researchers in natural science and physical science, there is every possibility to have higher citations. But in the case of health or social science and humanities, to have such high citations is something rare. And she has more than near about 3,000 citations. So I think she's the most suitable person to speak on research publications. So now the mic is over to you, Professor Dantas. Welcome you.
You are muted right now.
Professor Dantas? Yes.
Thank you, Professor Molly, and thank you, Head of Department, Dr. Anand. I just wanted to say that it's really a privilege. And what I wanted to share now in the next 45 minutes or so is my own journey and the journey of some of my PhD students. And sharing that journey, I hope, will allow you as researchers to pause and to think about your own research journey and research outputs. Because then you can say, where do I want to go? I want to become an academic. And if I want to become an academic and an international scholar, this is what I'm going to try and do for the next 5 years, 10 years or more. Yeah? So I will take you on this little journey and share some things of what you need to think about while thinking about a thesis output. So if you are all PhD scholars and you're going to produce a thesis, what you need to think about. So I'm just going to share my screen and then we'll go from there. Yeah. Are you able to see the screen, Yamini?
It's just opening up. Yeah, we are. Yes, we can.
Okay. So today I am going to talk about research outputs and publications, and this is your growth in your research journey. So you can be a researcher or a research scholar or an academic and do research, publish your report, and let the report just sit somewhere where you share it. Or you can take that 1 or 2 steps and think about, what will I do with this research report? What will I do with some of the outputs so that I can share this wider with the academic community? And what are some of the steps you can take here? Now, I want to begin that before I actually came to Australia in 1999, I had worked for about 14 years in India and 3 countries of Africa. But the university journey in Australia taught me some key skills. And here on this slide, this is the picture of my university, as you can see it here. So it's the largest university in Western Australia. It has nearly 56,000 students here and 4 faculties: the Faculty of Humanities, the Faculty of Science and Engineering, the Faculty of Business and Law, and the Faculty of Health Sciences. And I belong to the Faculty of Health Sciences, but my background is multidisciplinary. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that, but I wanted to just show you this picture of my university because it has helped me with my growth as an academic, as a researcher, but also as a community member. Yeah. So again, because it's the last lecture, I'd like to now again acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm presenting. And I would like to pay my respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. And this is something that we in Australia do because we know that our Aboriginal people are the oldest, some of the oldest people on the planet, but they've also been significantly stigmatized and marginalized during the last 200 years. But as a migrant woman, I've also been welcomed in Australia. So my commitment is to work with people from all over the world, men and women, and other younger academics. But so this is the core of the work that I do. So a little bit about my background, which some of you I've shared with in these last days, but I wanted to actually talk to you and so that you can actually get an idea. So I grew up in India, in Mumbai, in a very simple, hardworking family. So my parents valued education for their 3 daughters, because one of the things that my father said is, nobody can take knowledge that is given to you. They can take anything away from you, but the education and knowledge you have is never going to go away. But I left as a young woman in my 20s for Africa, and I lived in Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda, and I experienced global events that have underpinned a lot of my work and my thinking. So I lived in Uganda during another pandemic, the HIV pandemic in the 1980s and 90s, which impacted a lot of the young people. I was in Uganda when the genocide took place in Rwanda and the civil conflict that led to mass movement of people and the death of nearly 1 million people. I was also in Africa when there was the end of the brutal regime of apartheid in South Africa, where the South African Blacks, as well as the Indians, were treated terribly. And I witnessed refugee and migrant movements with impact of conflict-related trauma and displacement. But I also saw the widespread violence against men and women. And why I wanted to share this particular slide is because in the last week, what has happened is, again, war and conflict has erupted in another region of the world, in Ukraine, that has had this mass movement of people because of the conflict, nearly 1 million. And out of these, within these, were 16,000 Indian students here. So violence takes place where it makes it very challenging for people. But for me, when I was in these countries, I grew passionate about community health, gender, health equality, and educational equality, and the social determinants. So in 1997 and 1999, I was in Rwanda. And you can see the school. This is the school that I started in 1997. And I worked with people who had undergone terrible trauma. Some of them have survived the genocide. Many of them had seen trauma that is unthinkable to you and me. Hiding in people's houses, hiding in the forest, losing family members. So a lot of significant trauma, but people were very resilient. They wanted to rebuild their country. And one of the things that the Rwandan government did is it has the genocide memorial sites. It took me 2 years to visit a church where there were the bodies that I've shown in one of the photographs. But I'm proud to say that the school is there today. And the school is today a 1,000-student bilingual school, English and French, that has the IB, International Baccalaureate Program. But why I wanted to share this is Rwanda was the topic of my PhD. I went back to Rwanda in 2000 and collected data on a mixed method study. So that was my first mixed method study, was my own PhD in 2000 that I undertook in Rwanda. So I did all the components. I did international field study. I spent 3 months in Rwanda. I left my children with my mother in Mumbai, India, so I could go and do field research. I owe her a depth of gratitude, and also the lady who looked after the children while my mother worked. And my supervisor was a wonderful Australian supervisor, experienced supervisor, and he is still at Curtin University and has been a great mentor to me. So whilst I was doing that and doing my PhD, I had no idea about publications, academic publications. So this was 22 years ago. I had no idea about academic publication, about referencing, how we should go about this journey. So at that time, what my supervisor, David Treggest, said to me is, Jaya, remember, it's always important to publish your work in any format, whether it's a book, whether it's a book chapter, whether it's a journal article, but go ahead and publish your work. And he was a great supervisor and a mentor, because today he is nearly 80 years old and he still works at the university. He still supervises students and undertakes research. So what did I do at that time with his guidance? My first publication was my edited book that I published in 2006. So in 2006, I published this book. It's actually sitting there. I should have kept it around, so I'll show you later. But it was Education Reform in Societies in Transition. And what he said is, if it's an edited book, Jack, the first thing you have to remember in a book is always publish with academic publishers or publishers of academic esteem. And that's one message that I wanted to give you all. If you want to go ahead and publish a book, go ahead. If you want to go ahead and publish an edited book where you are the editor, go ahead. But always have an international academic publisher of esteem, because they look after the publication. They look after the marketing. You don't spend any money. They undertake a scholarly peer review process. You are involved in every stage, but what happens when you're involved in every stage is that you learn. For me, this experience was wonderful because it made me reach out to 16 academics from 16 different countries. So my chapter in that, my professor David and myself wrote the first chapter, and I wrote a chapter on Rwanda. So I had 2 chapters and an edited book from this book. But I made academic friends at that time from all of these countries: Turkey, Israel, South Africa, Venezuela, Bhutan, Estonia, Nepal, Philippines, Timor-Leste, Pakistan, Tajikistan, Kashmir. So there was a chapter on India, but it focused on Kashmir, which has seen conflict and transition, Lebanon, Tanzania, and Zimbabwe. So this was just a wonderful experience to actually meet academics from each of these countries, reach out to them, get their chapter. I learned the process of reviewing and editing with my supervisor. So my first experience, I finished my PhD in 2003. It was a thesis, a typeset thesis. But then by 2006, I had this publication with Sense Publishers, which is an international publisher for education journals. They are very good. Keep them in mind if you want. They also have an ebook for developing countries, and they are based in the Netherlands. They have now changed. So from Springer, it was an offshoot of Springer, to Sense, and now they have been taken over by Brim. And they did everything for me, and I had a very good experience working with them. What happens next? So next, I was given a consultancy to do a project in Timor-Leste, which is a tiny, tiny country sandwiched between Indonesia and Australia. Some of you may not have heard of it, but it was annexed by the Dutch first and then by the Indonesians. And then it now is a free country. But I was given an opportunity to actually publish, to do a study. So I did a large second mixed method study in Timor-Leste. So it's my second post-conflict country, Timor-Leste. But what I learned at this time, I was also fortunate enough to get a grant which was given to me in Western Australia, to look at the adolescent and young refugee perspectives of psychosocial well-being. Now, in the photo on the right, I'm presenting the report in Timor-Leste. The lady in the middle is the head of UNICEF, and the man on the side is the Deputy Minister of Health. But what I would like to say is what I'm showing in this screen is two reports, two research reports. When you write a research report, always take permission whether it can be published online to the wide web, to the academic community. And often they have given me the permission. So I will put an ISBN number to my research reports. So these are research reports. They are research reports that have an ISBN number. But in Australia, we are fortunate enough to have one more thing, which is the Australian Policy Online, which is an online repository of research reports. So I upload my research reports on this online repository, and anyone can have access to that. And people will have access and will come back here. So in East Timor, I did my second mixed methods study. It was a large 6-district study of 1,200 households. We also did focus groups and vulnerability assessments. So I learned about vulnerability assessments in Timor-Leste, and it looked at vulnerability assessment of populations at risk. Next, my first PhD student. So here I was, a young woman in my mid-30s, and my first PhD student was a much older woman, and we began a wonderful journey. So the lady in the pink in the photograph, as you can see, is Dr. Pam O'Connor. She was a psychologist and very experienced, but wanted to do her PhD. So she had a master's degree in women's studies. She had an undergraduate degree as a nurse. She had a degree in psychology, but now she wanted to do a PhD. And she came to me and she said, Dr. Jaya, I want to do a study, but I'd like to do something in India, if possible. And what she did is, she did this study in India with HIV women, HIV-impacted women. So what we did is, when she was doing her PhD, she said, I don't want journal publications, Jaya. I would like to publish a book of the women whom I will speak to. So we started a relationship at that time with the Somaya University Medical College that had an HIV NGO, an NGO that outreached to women who are impacted by HIV. And they provided Pam the access to the lower socioeconomic houses and slums around their hospital. And basically, she was able to do her study. So she did her study from 2005, finished in 2008 and 2009. And by 2011, we had published a book. So that was my first edited book. This was our authored book. So you have to remember the difference. The edited book is where there are contributions of multiple chapters by multiple authors. You take the lead as an editor. You will have a couple of chapters also, but it's predominantly edited and you put it together. This is an authored book. So we were only the two authors of the book, and it was based on her thesis. So she had to modify her thesis into this book, and she was able to do it beautifully. And we went back to India to share the book, launch the book, and also to meet the women who were participants in the study. So that was really important to Pam. So from being a psychologist, my student, then she went on to continue with her practice as a psychologist. But we have remained professional colleagues and friends who have a very good relationship with each other. My second edited book, and this was in Timor-Leste. Now, I was just fortunate to do multiple projects over 10 years in Timor-Leste. And when I was doing the multiple projects in Timor-Leste, I met this wonderful academic. So this is my journey of meeting wonderful women as we go on. So Margie was a retired academic from Australian Catholic University, and she decided, I've retired, I want to give back to the world, I will go and live in Timor-Leste, and she has lived in Timor-Leste. So in my journeys, I met her, and I said, Margie, would you like to edit a book on rebuilding education and health from in Timor-Leste? And she said, yes, I would like to do that. And we published our second edited book with contributions from different people in Timor-Leste. So basically, I had a contribution, Margie had a contribution. The third editor, Lorraine Connell, had also a contribution. Margie and Lorraine were assistant editors. I took the lead in putting everything together. And some of my master's students contributed. They were living and working in Timor-Leste. So this was another project that we did. Now, my second book. So my second book is about the Goans in Western Australia. So basically, in this one, we got a community history grant. And because of the community history grant, I worked with a team of researchers to interview about 100 migrants in Western Australia. So what the Goan community said, we need to publish a coffee table book that everyone will have a free copy because we've got the funding. So basically, that's what we did. We published a book. And this was a wonderful book that has gone international. So many Goans from different parts of the world reach out to me and ask me about the book. Now, because it was a special occasion and 30th anniversary of the Goan Association, we had the Indian High Commissioner from Canberra come to launch the book. And here is Sujata Singh. At that time, she's now retired, but she was the High Commissioner of India to Australia. And she launched the book. So it was a wonderful opportunity for me. And I have some of my research assistants. One is from Ethiopia, one is from England, and one is Australian. The young Australian lady wanted to wear a sari for the launch of the book. Then I have another PhD student, and Gwen is a PhD student. She's also a psychologist. And she wanted to look at the Bali bombings. And she said that she would also like to publish a book from her PhD. And this was my third authored book with Gwen and another supervisor. And we wanted to look at terrorism, trauma, and psychology, a multi-level victim perspective of the Bali bombings. And she published it through Routledge. So this was another publication that another of my PhD students did. I helped her through the process. She had this deep connection. Now, some of you may have heard about the Bali bombings in 2002. So 20 years. This year was the 20th anniversary of the Bali bombings. 202 Australians lost their lives during that Bali bombing. And Gwen was one of the first and second responders to people here who had been impacted, whose families had been impacted by the violence. But coming here, I wanted to share some of my PhD students and what they have done. So I would start with another older woman. So one thing I have to tell you is, in Australia, age is not a barrier to do your PhD. People do their PhDs at any age, in their 50s, in their 60s, and one of the oldest PhD graduate was in his 90s, but he was sharp as and did his PhD 2 years ago. But here, the picture at the bottom left-hand side is of Mary. So Mary is an Aboriginal woman, and she was one of the stolen generation. So this is a terrible history that Australia has. And she published a book of her experiences as one of the stolen generation. She didn't know who her mother was because the Australian government has had this terrible policy where they took away children from their Aboriginal children who are half Aboriginal so that they would come out from their community. So these children grew up not knowing their real parents. So this has been a big problem. My other student on the top, you can see the African student, Barbara Natabi, Dr. Barbara Natabi. She is the student who did her study on Uganda. So she was the one who did her mixed method study. So as part of her PhD, she published 4 books, four journal articles, I beg your pardon. And today she's an academic at the University of Western Australia. And the one in the glasses on the side is Claire Rogers. And Claire did her PhD on safe abortion in Nepal. And she has published 3 journal articles. Currently, she works as a senior research officer for family planning, New South Wales in Australia. But before that, she had this strong urge to work internationally, and she got a job with the World Food Program in Nigeria, in northern Nigeria, and was there for some time. But due to COVID, she returned back here. And then here is in the middle photographs, you have the lady in the short dark hair is Rachel, my PhD student. She is the one who did her PhD on women's health and the difficulties of their lives in Papua New Guinea. She published 4 papers. And I was telling Professor Molly yesterday that after she published her 4 papers, she then got a job with the World Health Organization, and she's based in Geneva. She worked in maternal and child health policy. And after she worked in maternal and child health policy, she has started her own consultancy. But I must tell you the story of Anne O'Neill, the one in the middle photo with the blonde hair. Anne is one of the bravest women I have met. And she has had terrible trauma and terrible tragedy, and she has overcome that. She was a young mother whose marriage deteriorated, and she separated from her husband with 2 young children. But when that happened, the husband was really upset and didn't take kindly to this. And it led to a tragedy where she lost her children and she lost her leg to it. But Anne was extremely brave. She said, even with the grieving process, where her children and were lost due to a murder-suicide committed by her partner, by her husband, she survived. And she went on to do her social work degree. She went on to do her honors degree, and she went on to do her PhD with me on the area of domestic violence. She then works in the Department of Justice. She started an NGO, and you can look it up and you can find the NGO because it's called Angel Hands. It helps survivors of who are victims of crime. So basically, she started that NGO and finished her PhD. So she did not allow this terrible, terrible tragedy to put her down, but went on to finish her PhD, start the NGO, met another wonderful man, and has a lovely son now. So Anne is very brave, and a few years ago, she got the award, the John Curtin Medal in the middle photo here, is given to an outstanding person who has done a lot of work in the community. So she did that, and we communicate and keep in touch with our mutual interests in the area of gender-based violence. And then the young woman on the right is Tambri Yusen. She's a nurse and epidemiologist, and she did her PhD with me in Timor-Leste. But after she did her PhD, she's also working for Médecins Sans Frontières. So she worked for Médecins Sans Frontières in South Sudan, MSF, in the conflict areas. She had gone to Ukraine, in Turkmenistan, and she spent 3.5 years with her husband and family in New Delhi. And she has also published. She has started a consultancy and she works as a lecturer for the University of Newcastle. So I tell all my students when they begin their research journey is think about what you want to do with your research. Do you want it to be just a thesis which will lie on a shelf? Or do you want a book that will be an academic publication that people will read? Do you want it to be journal articles that will be in the academic domain and shared and will help you in your own career? Yeah. And now I'm working on various projects. So I shared with you the Photo Voice project, and I'm concluding 2 projects. One is called Empower, which is a peer mentoring program of refugee women. And one is called Samba, which is a physical activity program of migrant women. So we are in the last stages of the project. And when I have the last stages of the project, I think about many things. So with my research team, I say, we have to have the report because our funder wants to have a report, the one who funded us for this project. Then we have to have journal publications. So we are writing journal publications from each of these. So from Empower, I have a research report that is in draft stage. I have 3 publications, 2 are under review. And from Samba, I have 2 publications published and 3 not published, under review and 3 in the pipeline. So I start thinking about this, but I will also have a community report that will be shared by the community. That is a short, sharp, simple report. So you have an academic report, which is a larger report, which contains the methods, which contains the literature review, but you have what is known as a 1-page policy report for the government, for other policymakers. You have a 3-page to 5-page community report. And then you have maybe a 25 to 40-page report that will have an ISBN that will be published under the Creative Commons license so that it can be shared and used by others. And that will be uploaded on Australian Policy Online. Now, who should consider preparing a thesis in the style of published papers? Publishing of papers during candidacy is highly regarded in some fields of study. Candidate whose research area involves several discrete stages or components form the basis of a series of paper thesis. But the decision to have a thesis with publications is made with advice from the thesis committee during your candidature. Now, I do not know how it works in India, and perhaps after this, Professor Molly can share it with me. But in Australia, we have the chair of the research committee, and then we have the primary supervisor, we call, which is the guide in India. And then we can have 1 or 2 associate or co-supervisors. We talk to them about what type of thesis a student might want to do. And once a decision is made, attention to the thesis format needs to be considered. Yeah? Now, what are the benefits of publishing during thesis candidature? You will receive peer review. So experts in the field external to the university will provide valuable feedback. Writing for publication provides you with a track record, which will benefit the candidate if they opt for a career in academia or research. And it may also enhance your own career prospects, particularly if the discipline places a high value on published papers. So, basically at present, I have one of my students. She is finishing her PhD. She's based in Bangalore. She looked at women's cancers in India, and she has finished her thesis, but she has written 5 papers, and they are in the, she'll be submitting them for consideration. Then issues to be considered carefully and identifying the most appropriate journal for publication. Publications in journal that have a high impact factor carry more weight. Guidance early on in candidature. So some journals take a long time to finalize the process. So basically, it's important to decide where you would like to publish your paper. And this is a conversation I have with my students. And one of the things I want to tell you, whoever are there and whoever will be listening, is to challenge yourselves, research scholars, and PhD candidates. It's really important to have a good selection of journals. And I will show you a link later on in these slides, one of my last slides. I make my students prepare a table because they are looking at 3 to 5 journal papers. They prepare a table very early on after their candidature is approved. So if it's a full-time student, they have 3.5 to 4 years. In the first 6 months, they have to present their candidature or their proposal. And it's at that time, in the first 6 months, that they think about that they might have 3 or 4 papers. And they go to the Skimago link. I've provided the link in my paper, in my presentation, and they look up the journal. And I say, whatever it is, work hard to publish in quartile 1 or quartile 2 journals. Do not consider the quartile 3 or 4, because your journal, your article then has a chance of being highly cited. Look, if possible, I never allow my students to publish in journals that don't have an impact factor. So this is another thing you want to consider. So important. And third, international journals and open access journals. And this is something that we are thinking about recently. You all are in a better position to look at open access journals. So like all the BMC journals are open access. All the MDPI journals are open access. BMJ Open is open access. Plus one, PLOS 1 is open access. And people from the developing world can ask for a fee waiver. And you're in a position as a PhD scholar to ask for that fee waiver. And here I want you to be very careful. Do not publish in predatory journals. It's very easy where good journals will not approach you to publish in that journal. It's predatory journals that will approach you to publish in their journals. And do not actually publish in predatory journals. There has been an increase in predatory journals in the last 10 years. And it's important to be really, really careful when you consider the journal. So what we have in Australia is you will have, if you have your journal articles, your 3 or 4, you have your literature review. So your literature review is your standalone chapter that actually looks at all the literature you have explored and why is there need for the study you are doing. Then your methods chapter, and then your journal articles and your review and discussion. We also have students who are doing creative work. So they are doing literary studies. They are doing creative writing. They are doing architecture. All their PhDs are different. So they will have a creative work and they'll present an exegesis. So a creative work will be a fiction piece that they have written. Or if it's a PhD in art, there's an art installation or an exhibition. So there's so many dimensions and ways in which theses can be presented. The review and discussion. So you have your articles, but the review and discussions integrate significant findings and limitations of your thesis or your research. But the review chapter or your final chapter, which answers your research questions and brings everything together, is your own work. Because for the journal articles, you might co-publish with your supervisors. So I have talked about this. Only papers in refereed scholarly journals are considered, and they have to be accepted for publication. So if you have said you have just submitted it, that's not considered. It has to be accepted. And if you have had some which have been published prior to your research journey, they will not be considered also. So just some things you need to keep in mind or bear in mind. What about conference papers, people ask. Now, in some disciplines, especially business and some disciplines of engineering, they take full conference papers of between 3,000 to 5,000 words. But conference papers only published in conference proceedings, and that are peer-reviewed can be, we do not allow conference papers that are not peer-reviewed, that have, and you have to have evidence of the peer review process. And the conference proceedings has to be published either online or as a book, preferably online, because you can then go and check. Now, another important critical aspect for younger research scholars to consider is joint authorship. So if you are a PhD scholar, and for any of my PhD scholars, they are the first authors on all the papers. I am as their supervisor or their guide, I'm the last author always. There can be other authors, someone who has helped them with the statistics, someone who has helped another person in the supervisory team. So we actually, at the beginning of the thesis, we have a small part where we have a table that shows what each of the authors has done. So this is really critical. And I have heard from students where they have felt undermined by the publication process, where they felt that they are not the first author. This is problematic. And this is something one has to negotiate early on and see to it, if it's your PhD, that you would be the first author. For me, I also encourage, even with my reports, for my research team to get a chance to be first author on the journal articles and myself to be the last author. But we make a decision in research reports, not in PhDs. So why choose a PhD by publication? Because then you can design your study in relatively discrete steps. You'd benefit from publications during candidature. You communicate your results, research findings in a timely manner. You maintain stakeholder interest and support. You have progressive, concurrent, and formative peer review. But the most important thing is you enhance your academic career. You have a track record, you build networks, you have co-author relationships. And the current university climate, I do not know how it is in India because I've been away for a long time. But again, Professor Molly can talk about this later. In Australia, the current university research climate expects you to publish. So my master's students will publish 2 to 3 papers and my PhD students will publish 3 to 5 papers. So it's or a book. My PhD students will, or a book they'll publish. So most of them start thinking about it, except in the case where they have sensitive data, where they say that, I am working for an international NGO. I don't need to publish. I will look at it at a later stage. Student considerations, the journal selection, the journal aims. And we have the rankings. You all might have it with the UGC, and this is something that Professor Molly can share afterwards, but we have what is known as Excellence in Research Australia, and they have a journal ranking. And basically, it's with those journal rankings that we go with. But I also have the Scimago link that I talk to you about. Then we have the authorship and the contribution. So it's important that all authors, the student does the major work, as a PhD scholar, but the other authors also contribute some or the other feedback. it's not enough just to have your name. You have to have ethically a contribution to it. But take the timelines into consideration. And another thing that I tell my students is the number of issues per year of the journal. So if the number of issues is very low, then if there are 2 or 3 issues a year of a journal, I would rather not go with that journal. I'll go with that journal that has 12 issues or more. So at least 1 issue a month. That means the chances of the volume it publishes of 6 to 8 articles per issue is higher. I talked about authorship considerations, the study design, the data collection, the analysis, writing the manuscript, critical revisions of the manuscript, statistical expertise, final approval, and submitting the manuscript. So basically, when my students create that table of journals that they identify, they actually look at a number of journals. And I tell them, do not be disheartened ever of rejection. It means the journal may have had a backlog of papers and all of that. You have written the article. If you have had feedback from peer reviewers, look at that feedback, address that, and find another home for the journal. And many a times they find that. So one of the articles that I sent for the research studies that we did, I may have sent that to Professor Morley day before yesterday. I think I can't remember, but it was an article for a research study that we had done, solid paper, but rejected by several journals. And we said, no, we are going to try. And then we had it published last year in the Australian Educational Researcher. The other thing is the copyright and publishing in quality journals. So it's always important, if your article is accepted for publication, it's really important to write to the copy editor or the assistant editor and say that I will be using this journal article for my PhD thesis. Is that okay? Is it okay to do that? And in many cases, most cases, they will do that. Because when you publish, you assign copyright to the journal. And then you must always take steps to avoid copyright infringement. Suppose, like in Australia, all our theses are on a national website called Trove. Because PhDs are funded by the federal government, it is a condition that unless there's specific restrictions, research should be open access. Now, this is what I wanted to talk to you about, the Scimago link there. And I will go to that after I finish this in a few more slides. And the Scimago link allows you to check the quartile of your journal. And that is very important. So I tell my students, identify the journals from your literature, go to the Scimago link and see which ones you would like to publish in. So I have actually discussed with you 3 types of thesis, where a student produces it as a typeset, like actual thesis, a bound thesis, and then produces a book, then a thesis by publication, where there are a series of 4 to 6 articles, and there's a literature review by the student, and the final chapter to bring it all together, and a short introductory chapter, and a hybrid thesis. A hybrid thesis is where they have written it up as articles, but they are in the process of being published. So there is that hybrid format that is considered. And my students do mostly a hybrid format. Now, I want to go with the last few slides. Because it's International Women's Day, just bear with me. I want to end the last few slides with talking about women in political decision throughout the world these days. When COVID started, I have been doing a lot of media around COVID and COVID equity and vaccine equity. We had in the world, only 6.2% of women heads of state. About 6 countries had women as heads of state. Women ministers were about 21%. Women health ministers were 24%. Women finance and budget ministers were 13%. Seats held by women were 24 and 36%. So what we saw was, as women, we still had a long way to go. And in the last 2 years, about 18% of women throughout the world have been submitted to domestic violence or intimate partner violence, especially due to lockdowns. But in 2021, there were 3 important women who were doing wonderful work globally. So you had the leadership. We had Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala from Nigeria. She took over the leadership of the World Trade Organization. She was the finance minister of Nigeria for 2 stints. And she was also the chair of Gavi, which is the global vaccine initiative that distributes vaccines to some of the poorest countries. The second one was Kristalina Georgieva, a Bulgarian, who took over the leadership of the International Monetary Fund, which actually distributes funds to developing countries. And then we have Christine Lagarde, who was a former finance minister of France, who took over the leadership of European Central Bank. So this was in 2022, but in 2021, but in 2022, it's breaking the bias. So breaking the bias is the theme of the International Women's Day 2022, and how challenging times are at this time. But I wanted to just end with 3 young women who are making a difference. One is Malala Yousafzai, who lives in the UK, but formerly of Pakistan, who always valued education and fought against the Taliban to be shot on the head. You have Greta Thunberg from Sweden, who's fighting for climate change. And then is Grace Tame from Australia, who was the Australian of the Year last year, who's only 27 years old and is fighting sexual abuse. So she was abused as a teenager by her teacher, and she fought against that and took him to court and underwent tremendous psychological impacts, but has overcome them and is fighting for sexual violence that women face. So, there are young women who are making a difference in the global stand. And my message and hope is to continue to provide men and women to further their education, because education helps us to feel empowered, to have opportunities, to build resilience, where both men and women are engaged in gender equality, social justice, and build communities of friendship and hope. So it's time, as we come to the next International Women's Day, to reshape, to be guided by human dignity for all. Thank you very much. But before we stop, and I throw it open to questions and ask Professor Molly to say a few words at that, I wanted to just show you 2 theses from my students. So I'm just going to go to that now. I've kept them open. Are you able to see
Yes,
this?
yes, we can see. We can see.
Oh, okay. So this is a student who published I was her chair of a thesis committee, so I was not her supervisor directly. And she looked at cancer outcomes with Aboriginal Australians. So she did it in 2010. She's a senior lecturer now, but I just wanted to show you her contents. So she had the chapter 1, which was the introduction and overview. Chapter 2 was the context of the study. Chapter 3 was setting the scene. and it was published as the first article in the Australian Health Review. Chapter 4, in chapter 4, she had different sections. And one of the last sections was an overview of cancer beliefs about disease in Indigenous people in Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and US. So she wanted to look at beliefs about cancer among Native people in 4 immigrant countries. And this was published as the second article. Her methodology was published in BMC Public Health. Then she had Article 4 published in BMC Health Services Research. Her Article 5 was published in the Medical Journal of Australia. Her Article 6 was published in the Australian Health Review, and her Article 7 was in the Journal of Ethnobiology and Ethnomedicine. So this was a young Bangladeshi woman who did her PhD looking at Aboriginal cancer in Australia and published 7 articles with a thesis by publication. So that was one which I wanted to show you. The second one I wanted to show you was my student. Her study was on adolescent empowerment programs in 2 vulnerable populations. She looked at rural Australia and rural India. And she's an Australian medical doctor, but she lives in Lucknow. She's still in Lucknow and comes to Australia, does locum here, and then goes back to Lucknow to work in community health, did a PhD with me. Very, very, she's a wonderful woman, and has been a mother, has been a community health worker, and is really connected to Lucknow in UP. So she has the first publication on vulnerability and social determinants of health. The second one was published, widening the arm of health promotion to include the most disadvantaged. When she actually, why is it a hybrid thesis? It was submitted for review, but it was published. The third paper was on empowerment and models of empowerment, and it was published in Health Education Research. The fourth paper was on Aboriginal adolescents in rural Australia, and it was published to Rural and Remote Health. It was an open access journal, and it was published. And then she had 4 papers published. She wrote 6 papers, but 4 were published. And she struggled to publish the other 2, and we kept doing them. And then she decided to just leave them for now because of the work that she was doing. So this was the second example. And now I just wanted to show you the Scimago link. So this is the Scimago link. So when you put the Scimago link, I have put the link for the journal Qualitative Health Research. So it gives you the H-index, it gives you the coverage. It has started in 1991 and it's still ongoing. It looks in it's medicine, public health, environment, occupational health, and various others. It's an interdisciplinary international journal. It tells you about the journal, but this is where you look. If you look at this one, you see the bar here. When I put here, since 2017, it's in Q1. Its ranking is Q1, Q1, Q1. But between 2014 and 2016, it was Q2. So my thing is, when you actually do this, you're able to see the journal and to see the ranking of the journal that you want to publish in. So I will stop this one now, and I'll stop my share. And I would like to just say in a final message is, I hope this has given you like a broad overview of the types of publications, the importance of our publications, and you should go ahead and publish. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Jaya. It was such a motivating, deliberation that you have made. And At the last, you have covered all these kinds of what, how to choose a publication, how to publish, so many things you have given, but you have also gone to the extent of giving us a message of the upcoming Women's Day. And the thing that I was most impressed is your two theses, how your scholars have published papers based on the thesis, at least one paper based on each chapter. So amazing. And when you think about the condition in India, it is almost similar to the PhD requirements in Australia. Here in India also, it is mandatory that a candidate has to publish at least one research paper in an international peer-reviewed journal before the submission of her thesis. But there are also scholars who publish one paper each on each chapter. It is also there. There are candidates who fail to submit the thesis just because they do not have a publication. So it all depends upon the scholar, the PhD scholar. In several of the science streams, there will be at least one paper based on one chapter. But in other streams, commerce and management, or what you call journalism, humanities, arts, there in some departments, I have seen that the scholars have at least one paper based on each chapter. But there are also scholars who do not have a single paper. In my case, all my scholars who have submitted their thesis have minimum 2 publications in international peer-reviewed journals.
That's good.
And even now, among my 8 scholars, 4 of them have already had one paper each in some international high-rated journals, and 2 of them in the UGC Care List journal. I have told you earlier also, in India, we have the system of UGC Care List. The UGC itself has published a list of journals, high quality journals, as they say, in which we could publish and which is taken as something high and something very good, and which will be considered in promotions, appointments, and everything. It is considered as something of high quality. So people will go for UGC Care List journal and for international peer-reviewed journals. One of my scholars, Ms. Yamini, she had sent a paper to the International Journal of Women's Studies, published from Bridgewater University, America. And actually, she sent it way back 1 year before. And she got the acceptance this month, last week. And I think it will take more time to get it published. So one important factor that the scholars in India face is to get a paper published in a high reputed journal, they will have to wait for a long time. And another thing is with regard to the article processing charges of open access journals, something we cannot afford at all. They will ask minimum 14,000, 32,000, 75,000, 1,50,000 rupees. How could we afford it? So that's a major problem faced by our scholars. So this is all the situation here. Those who are very enthusiastic, they will publish more. And those who are a little bit lazy or something, I cannot say what it is. Perhaps their conditions might be different. I don't know how they will submit the paper at the end of 5 years because they do not have a publication. Even in the 5th year, they are not having a publication. But there are scholars who have completed 2 years and they have had 2 publications. So it all depends upon the scholar. And they are all, what I have said is they are all my scholars. I am the same guide. But some of them publish 4, some 2, and some nothing. So it is a matter of the enthusiasm of the scholar. It is also a matter of the scarcity of journals which publish on time. They have so much of purpose in the pipeline. And so they will publish the first accepted purpose first. So when we ask them, wow, it is almost 1.5 years, then why don't you publish it? Yes, we will publish it. You have to wait a little more because we are publishing the first received purpose. So likewise, there are so many factors. Enthusiasm of the learner, then the scarcity of our financial sources to publish in high indexed open access journals. Open access always demand APC, and our scholars cannot afford it. And as you have told me earlier, in Australia, every scholar is getting a minimum of a very good, what you call fellowship. But in India, in some of the universities, they have high fellowship, but in state universities, the fellowship amount is very, very minimal. So with that, how could they afford to publish in what you call this open access, high rated journals? That's very impossible. And otherwise, they will have to wait a longer times, 1 year, 2 year waiting period. So these are all the situations here. But then the international peer-reviewed journals, some of them, they will publish within 1 year. So they will send to them, we will wait for them and get it published in 1 year time. That's the situation. And thank you, Jaya. Thanks a lot. And now I think, Yamini, you can read out the questions.
Yes, ma'am. So there are a lot of compliments for you, Professor Jaya. Thank you, Professor Jaya. It's mesmerizing. I felt like I was listening to music. So that was one of the comments. And Balsala ma'am has also said that most of our students are currently engaged in internships and assignments. So they couldn't attend all the sessions, but they are all saving the recordings and watching it when they have time. So she said that. And one of the questions that has come in is, Surya Prabha asks if she can transform her previously published paper into a book chapter. Is there any copyright issues if one tries to do that?
So my question to her would be, is why would she want to convert? It is already published as a book chapter. Why does she want to convert it into a journal article? Is there no data from whatever she has published to additional data that she can use to publish another journal article? So something that has already been published either as a book chapter or a journal article should not actually be published again. It's much better to use some more data from that thesis or from the research to publish another journal article.
Okay, ma'am. And Atiku asks, is Scimago the only high index journal?
Scimago is not a journal. Scimago is a link that allows you to check the journal that you're going to publish in, whether it is in quartile 1 or quartile 2 or quartile 3. So Scimago is like a database which will allow you. So for example, I use the link to actually check the journals that my students are going to be publishing in. So if it is qualitative health research, Healthcare for Women's International, Australia New Zealand Journal of Public Health, Medical Journal of Australia, you put the name of the journal into the Scimago link, and it will give you the background of that journal, whether it has an impact factor. What is the impact factor? Yeah.
It rates the journals, the quality of the journals, right?
Yes.
In some sense. Okay. All right. So another question from that person is to ask if they can publish a book chapter with you in collaboration. In fact, there have been a lot of requests for that on YouTube also.
Yes. So if they want to publish with me in collaboration, it's much better first to go with their supervisors, their research team, and then. But if it's unusual to ask someone who is not actually part of your research team or your research supervision team to ask. I mean, sometimes you can reach out and your supervisors can reach out, but it's okay. I have helped students everywhere, but it's not the norm in many ways at Atiku.
Ikshita asks if Scopus and Web of Science are similar to Scimago.
Scopus and Web of Science are databases. So they are databases, and yes, there you can find your H index, you can also find about the journal. So you can, yes, you can do it with the Web of Science and you can do it with Scopus, but sometimes with Web of Science, they're very restrictive to certain disciplines, and Scopus with other disciplines. I find Scimago, which is much more broader.
Paul Titus asks if MLA is good for indexing.
I actually, well, I have never used MLA. Can Paul Titus tell me what MLA is?
As we understand, MLA is a way of citing. So I don't know if
Isn't
what he was trying
MLA
to-
referencing?
Yeah, it is.
So like
It's a style of
ABA,
referencing.
Chicago School,
Yes.
the Howard and Vancouver, it's a referencing, but I'm not sure which one
What he was. Yeah.
he's talking about.
Paul, can you clarify a little bit about that question? We'll wait for that.
Ma'am, good evening. This is Paul Titus.
Yes.
Can you hear me, ma'am?
Yes, I can hear you.
Ma'am, actually, we have a use care list, right? There is a list of journals which includes Scopus and Scopus and Web of Science, and also there is a list of journals which is included in MLA index. That is why I am asking.
No, I think, Jaya, there is some confusion that might have happened, because MLA, it is only a referencing style. And in the UGC care list, they have never mentioned about MLA thing. Maybe you might have misread something. You have to look into it once again. UGC definitely has given a long list of care list journals. And there they say, either you can publish in the care listed journals, or you can publish in any journal which is indexed by Web of Science or Scopus, not MLA. Okay, you please read that once again where you have seen that. So as far as my understanding goes, it is like that too.
So I've actually just looked it up as you're talking, Professor Molly and
Yes.
Paul Titus. It is actually, MLA is a modern language association. It is an MLA international bibliography, and it's also a style of citing and indexing. So it's different. So because it's on modern language association, maybe it's used mostly by linguistics and sociolinguistics rather than this. So if it's interdisciplinary and looking at all the disciplines, I would go by either Scopus, either by Web of Science or Scimago.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So Dr. Meera wants to say something.
Yeah, namaste. Namaste to all of you, Professor Dantas and dear Professor Molly. This is Meera from the University of Mysore. I must say that, first of all, if it was not for Dr. Molly's, very, very supportive sharing of links, I couldn't have been here in spite of many, challenges. But thanks so much. And I must say it was really worth it, Professor Dantas. It's been extremely endearing from your end to, I think I've just written, it just came in. I couldn't stop myself from writing what I wrote on the chat box. Very, very endearing and very giving, personality. And God bless. It's really, really good to see, because we often have a climate of, I don't know what to say. The word could be severely guarded secrecy or something like that, where very few are even ready to actually share as much as, even, when we invite them, so that endearing nature has really helped many of us to, of course, we've been that way, but it's been very few odd ones out. I must also share that yesterday I couldn't join in and speak because I was in a meeting and very stealthily listening. But I was happy to know that you were also collaborating with Veena Punacha, and I think Shukla ji is here, and she is also one of those people with whom I had interacted, or I was coordinating the research project with the ICRW, Washington DC, from Bangalore, and very similar to the journey that you have been going through, Professor Dantas. But I must say that coming from the development sector as a practitioner, I'm still, finding several challenges with, students who come from very vulnerable backgrounds. Our research candidates do come from very severely marginalized communities. For example, one of my students is coming from she's a first generation women candidate, and many such challenges. So how, I would also, wanted to ask whether you have any suggestions for good resource portals or websites which you generally refer to your PhD students. Like I always look at Purdue, and there are several such universities who have good resource, downloads and good resource tips for the PhD research candidates. So if you have, because I think what you have been sharing has been very useful in terms of also, building up a table, which I used to do actually, not just, though I don't call it a table, but a chart where you can actually, you're planning, what are you going to publish at the end of, maybe as you progress through the research. So that was a very handy tip. And the other question I had was that, it would, I'm sure as a publisher, I'm sure you have gone through several ups and downs. So what are the challenges which you faced long ago and now also, do you still have those, hiccups, and as a writer, as a publisher, and how do you go about, overcoming those challenges even now as a learner and publisher? And then also, how can you share some secret tips that you think are very, very essential for a researcher, even as a guide? As a guide, I teach development studies, PhD program as a guide and supervisor. It is, I'm a supervisor with the development studies and rural development as well as women's studies. So these are the areas of my specialization. So if you can suggest it, I think it would be useful for many, because when we actually start guiding, there are several hiccups that one faces. So if you can just throw some light on that.
So one thing I would like to say is that for us, we have many students who are first in family to go to university, and especially higher education. Many students who have taken the journey of being something else and then come. I also taught in the development studies program for 5 years at the university before, while I was teaching in international health also. So there are students, but one thing about, I think, where I feel fortunate is in Australia, our libraries have lots of open access facilities for students. So basically, if they are students of the university, they are able to access the databases, they are able to access the library. The library is a beautiful 6-story structure, and it's open in the term times, in the semester times. So from February, end of February till the end of June or middle of June, 24/7. So, a student can go there and sit there and study there. There are small group working sessions. So I think that's one advantage that's there. There's full Wi-Fi access, free to all the students. So students have the databases, they have that library. So that is a big difference, I think, for students from the developing world. This lack of access, that is not there. But I know that internet is more available now in India, but I'm not sure at the university level or at the libraries in the university. But there are some open access journals. And I will send you, Dr. Meera and Professor Molly, a list of journals which your students can access, which don't require a fee. They only require the internet. So basically, BMJ Open, PLS1, the BMC journals, the Bulletin of the World Health Organization, all of these do not require any fee to join. So students will be able to access the journals and read the journals. Google Scholar is a good way to look at. So rather than Google, I tell my students, go to Google Scholar, and it's free. You can go to Google Scholar and get the journal publications from there. What I feel is like, when you have students from vulnerable groups, it's important to always encourage and give them hope, that it is a journey, like the PhD or the master's is a journey. There will be light at the end of the tunnel. It is a long journey because it takes, 4 years, 5 years, and there might be roadblocks. But the important thing I tell women is you have to complete that journey. Don't give up, and many of my students go through difficulties. So everywhere in the world, there's something that happens, COVID. I had a student, male student in Melbourne. There were 6 lockdowns he was faced with, and he had a wife who was pregnant, a baby who was born, a baby who had a problem with her health issues. But we are submitting his thesis in the next 2 weeks, and he has published 4 papers. 3 papers already published. 4th paper is in the row, and the 5th paper I'm reviewing this weekend, and it will be submitted, And he got a job in a small college as a senior lecturer. So he's very happy, but the journey took long, and it was quite difficult for him. So these things do happen where you have those challenges, or the challenges where you have to think, what can I do? How can I do this as best as possible? So I think for us, as their guides or as supervisors, it's important to actually give them that encouragement, and hope, and the ability that you don't give up. You don't give up, because I tell my students, do not be discouraged by a journal rejecting you. It's not about you. Don't take it personally. It's not about you. It's not about your research. For whatever reason, the article is saying, look at the peer. If they give peer review comments, you look at those comments and find another journal. So it's these things that we look at. So sometimes the students say, okay, I'm going to look at other journals and go ahead. And sometimes they find it too discouraging and they might not go ahead. But we reinforce the fact that it's important to publish. And even after they've finished their PhD, in a year and a half, in the 2 years post-PhD, I encourage students to publish and will help them through the process.
Great.
And
thank you so much.
your best practices.
Yes.
Now
Yamini, it has become almost 4:30, and it is time for us to get a few feedback from Yamini. Could you please share the feedback link in the chat box?
Sure,
And also, I would like to get a few feedback from some of the participants who are present here. 2 or 3, maybe 4 feedback in short time. Anybody would like to, you can unmute and you can say how these sessions of all the days, how you could benefit from it.
Some of the people have already, some of the people have already put it up on the chat box also.
Chat box. And if anybody who would like to open up, make it so crisp. Anybody?
Ma'am, can I say a few words?
Okay, start.
I'm Esther, ma'am. I'm Esther, ma'am.
Esther. Please, Esther, come on.
Ma'am, this is such a wonderful workshop. I mean, we had our disruptions, we had our difficulties, but ma'am, Professor Dantes was really super. She has given me such encouragement to go pursue things with resilience. Maybe just like what I felt today's session, I thought she talked about, like Robert Bruce, go ahead, go and try once more. You'll definitely come to your goal within a few, what should I say, the life's heart's journey, you will reach where you want to go. So I think, ma'am, you have just been wonderful. I think all the speakers throughout the workshop have given us valid points through which we can move forward. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, Dr. Molly. So it has been just great for us. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Esther. Thank you. Anyone else?
Can I, ma'am?
Yes.
Thank you for the wonderful session, ma'am. You said it while you were talking. My background is multidisciplinary, and beyond the gifts you have given is hope and courage, definitely. And I feel it's like hearing a music here, because you people are talking very nicely and presenting in a good way. Thank you for your valuable presence and presentation here, Dr. Molly, ma'am, and our girls. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. One more, perhaps you can take.
Hello.
Hello, who is
Dr.
speaking?
Yeah. This is Vatsala from RCWS SNDT.
Okay.
And
okay,
I must congratulate first the University of Calicut, Professor Modi and the entire team, and all the resource persons. And we have been with this workshop for the last 1 week. And we and all the students, they were eagerly waiting for these sessions and all the pre-readings, and especially Professor Dantas, the way she has, narrated her journey, and with all those, her experiences. These were not the theoretical concepts, but they were woven with all her lived experiences, with her own research field views, and her students' journey as well. So I would just like to sum up that it was really very enriching, insightful, and inspirational for all my students and here. And I really look forward to how we can move ahead with that, and all the students also, how we can take it forward. And just not listen to it and it's it, but how they can take this forward. And thank you so much, Professor Dantas. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Vatsala. Thank you so much. So, Yamini,
Yes,
shall I
ma'am.
move on to the Thanksgiving? Can I?
Yes. Ma'am,
Because
could
it is
I
almost
just
4:30.
quickly add from the side of researchers here? Ma'am, today's class was excellent. It was really a masterclass, and you've shared your experience, your journey, and also the journey of your students. And I think that has been such an inspiration for all of us. And despite whatever difficulties we face, I think we should strive ahead. And I think that has been, and to also have a structure in place and planning in place before we do our research. And I think that has been my learning from today. To plan ahead and to keep at it. So thank you so much, ma'am. And I next would like to invite Dr. Molly Kurula, our coordinator and my guide, to conclude the session.
Okay. So thank you, Yamini. Dear all, now we have reached the final phase of the workshop on qualitative research. The time to give the Thanksgiving. It indeed was an intellectual feast for me as an academician and researcher. And from the feedback shared by you in the chat box and from those you have shared openly, I could feel that all of you could benefit from the workshop, get motivated on how to move forward. And thank you all for your encouraging feedback. Regarding our gratitude. First of all, I am immensely thankful to our resource persons who have extended their time, expertise, and efforts to the workshop, especially Professor Jaya Dantas, who was the lead speaker and served us on 5 days of the 7-day workshop. It was her willingness to share her experience and expertise that actually culminated in this international workshop. I had an opportunity to prepare a publication in collaboration with her. And she only reminded me about the importance of publishing in high-indexed journals. Definitely, publications increase our visibility in the international context. We, the academicians and researchers engage in in-depth researches, come out with very interesting findings, yet we do not show that much interest in publishing the same. Professor Dundas has familiarized us with some of the rigorous research approaches and methodologies. She has shown us how her scholars and she herself has published that much in high-index journals. As Dundas herself has exhorted us, action begins with a desire to listen. Yes, we have all listened to you, and now we are taking forward the insights from this workshop and enter into more participatory qualitative researches and publish more in international academic publications of esteem. On behalf of all the participants on and offline, University of Calicut and the Department of Women's Studies, and on behalf of my team of organizers, I extend our love and sincere gratitude to you. The participants are the strength of any workshop. I felt so elated when I got regular appreciation and Thanksgiving notes from hundreds of participants. I extend my heartfelt thanks to all the participants who are actually fellow researchers, academicians, and research scholars. This workshop is the result of the teamwork of my 8 research scholars who have volunteered with each and every responsibility in organizing this workshop. Some of them preparing the flyer, the others with the feedback form, others with managing and meeting ID and password and so on. And I feel it so easy to organize more of such workshops and seminars in the company of my research scholars. I would make a special mention of Ms. Yamini Virginia Joan, who took the lead role in organizing the workshop and managing the Zoom platform. Thank you all, my scholars, and all my colleagues at the Department of Women's Studies. And we are thankful to the authorities of the University of Calicut who have extended all kinds of support in the conduct of this international workshop. And I hope we will all keep in touch in the days ahead. Let us stay connected in fruitful collaborations in our future research and publications. Thanking you, one and all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and happy International Women's Day for 8th of March.
Yes.
And let's work in solidarity, and happy to do any projects in India. Yeah. Professor
Definitely
Molly,
we must
Dr.
do.
Meera, Dr. Vatsala, I'm very happy to do that anytime.
Yeah, sure. Happy Women's Day to you too.
Yeah, one and all. Happy Women's Day. Let us all together break the bias, break the stereotypes.
Yes.
Surely break the bias.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
we'll join hands and wish you
Sure,
wonderful
sure.
work. Take care.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
And
Bye.
Professor Jaya, you will remain in everybody's heart, not only in their minds, in everybody's heart, because you
Yes.
have stolen our hearts.
Yes. Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And all
Thank
the
you.
very best to all the scholars, PhD scholars here, and may they go onwards and upwards, as we say.
Yeah.
Same
Bye
to you.
for now.
Wishes to you too. Bye.
Bye.
Dr. Molly, I remember being with you one of those years. Really remember? I think
Yes,
3 years
yes.
ago for the Women's Day. This
Yeah,
was something
program.
good time.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. And I can't, big hugs to you, okay, for making me be here. If it was not for your really genuine inclusive nature, I don't think I could have made it. And then Professor Danta's presentation made me stay on. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And all the team members here, all your wonderful team, and the University of Calicut also. Wishes, best wishes.
Thank you.
Big
Thank
hugs
you.
to all the women and the guys here. Take care.
See, in the feedback form, we have given something at the last. would you like to join any further workshop of similar nature? And if I get more of responses that they are very much keen and interested, definitely with the promises from Professor Jaya Dantas, we will be organizing something more rigorous at a higher level in the future. Okay. Thank you, Dantas. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.